What if the real strength is saying enough? You awaken in the half-light of illusion, each breath a whispered refusal of denial. Reality has no sugarcoat, its sweetness is the absence of deception. In the stillness before dawn, you glimpse the machinery of your own will pushing ceaselessly against the current of being. You feel fatigue in every sinew, not of body, but of spirit. There is a moment when the armor cracks, not with violence, but under the silent weight of unspoken recognition. Enough. Here, possibility collapses. The illusions unravel one by one, the promise that achievement will fill the emptiness, that love will cure your solitude, that tomorrow will redeem today. The world has sold you illusions wrapped in silver ribbons. You tore them open and found only hollow echoes. And yet the tearing awakened something sharp and beautiful. Awareness. Suffering is not failure. It is the dark mirror of your own existence that reveals what you strive to ignore. You chase comfort, significance, connection, but it eludes you. And when it does not, it reveals its own fragility. So you circle again, the labyrinth tightens, the breath shortens, until you touch the edges of despair, that place where the walls breathe with the hum of your own unfulfilled wanting. Pause. There is a peculiar release in the admission, I am tired. I am tired of the chase. I am tired of pretending. I sit with that fatigue as a physician sits with a wound, not to nurse it vainly, but to see clearly what lies beneath. The modern world speaks in promises. Be productive, be happy, be yourself. Yet those slogans are echoes, void of meaning. They drown depth in distraction, drown sorrow in the babble of self-importance. You begin to see the machinery, the screen, the scroll, the curated life presented as truth, and in seeing, a hollowness opens. You realize the curated self is not you, but a mask pressed into the place where you once felt life. In that revelation, suffering returns, but it is no longer a tormentor. It is the lamp illuminating what you've buried. The ache in your chest is not a weakness, but an alarm. The despair is not a jail, but a threshold. And standing on that threshold, you say quietly, enough. That word is not resignation, it is surrender to what island, to suffering when it comes, to emptiness when it opens, to silence when the noise subsides. Not the noise of promise, but the quiet of reality. That quiet is not empty, it is pregnant with the unadorned truth of your being. It is strange and beautiful, the strength that isn't effort but cessation, the courage that isn't forward motion but letting go, the peace that isn't arrival but acceptance of the pathless path. In the depths of despair you find spaciousness, a recognition that the will, so relentless, so demanding, can relent, not forever, perhaps, but in this moment, in this breath, to cease, to observe, to be. And as you breathe into the stillness, the illusions do not vanish with fanfare, they fall away softly, the way old snow melts under subtle heat. You find yourself alone, profoundly alone, and yet, for the first time, not lonely. In solitude, there is no promise, there is no palliative, there is only clarity. The release points come in mourning. You mourn your attachments, your beliefs, your comfort zones, those illusions you fed with your longing. Each morning is a letting go, and in the letting there is sorrow, but also a subtle relief, a revelation uncoiling in the dark. Pain and truth entwine. You feel the rawness of awareness, the naked moment where you gaze at the world unfiltered and find no need to dress it, no need for masks, no need for tomorrow's reassurance. You are enough in your sorrow, enough in your stillness, enough in your refusal to continue the play of illusion. And so the voice that was once raised in hope lowers itself into silence, not an ending, but a disappearance of desire. You are not triumphant, you do not shout, you do not promise, you do not inspire. You dissolve. The candle flickers until there is only flame and shadow, flame and truth, no curtain, no escape. And in that fading glow, reality remains. Suffering is not punishment, but mirror. Illusion is not deception, but distraction. Strength is not conquest, but surrender. Enough. The world does not wound with intention, it wounds because it exists. The machinery of life turns without regard, and we, caught in its indifferent gears, interpret pain as personal, though it is merely structural. The sun scorches not out of hatred, but necessity. So too does existence sear the soul, not out of malice, but by its very nature. We are flung into the world as willing subjects of a blind, ceaseless impulse, and we suffer because the will within us never sleeps, never releases, never truly arrives. Desire paints the future in golden light, but the present is always grey. The hand reaches, the heart believes, and yet the grasp is empty. Each satisfaction gives birth to a new hunger, as if the will mocks us through the very act of fulfillment. The moment we taste what we long for, its sweetness turns bitter. This is the cruel irony of the will. It creates longing, not to satisfy it, but to perpetuate its dominion. We are marionettes straining toward joy, only to be pulled back into the taut string of needing once more. And so, one begins to see detachment is not a virtue, but a clarity. To step back from the carnival of desires is not moral purity, it is exhaustion recognized as wisdom. When the voice within says, "I can no longer play this game," it is not failure, but a final triumph of honesty. The world remains as it is, chaotic, indifferent, restless, but in detachment, its grip loosens. You still feel the sting, but it no longer dictates the rhythm of your breath. Suffering, when observed rather than resisted, becomes a strange teacher. It unmasks the idols you knelt before: success, love, identity. It shows them to be shadows, not substance. You begin to see that the anguish was not just from pain itself, but from believing it shouldn't be. The resistance, the denial, the desperate attempts to escape that was the true fire. When you sit still in the flame, without flinching, it reveals not hell, but emptiness. And in that emptiness, the quiet mind awakens. We spend our lives in pursuit of narratives that grant us meaning, yet the meanings we chase are fictions stitched together by fear. Fear of death, fear of insignificance, fear of vanishing. So we construct purposes, doctrines, identities, careers, all to distract from the truth that there is no cosmic explanation, only the fact of being and its relentless hunger to persist. That is the will, a blind, insatiable force, and we, its temporary embodiment, suffer under its demand to become more, always more, though we never become anything truly different. In detachment, this chain can be seen for what it island. One does not break it through strength, but through stillness, not by fighting desire, but by letting it pass without participation. The illusion then fades, not because it is destroyed, but because it is no longer fed. The will weakens not with violence, but with understanding. You do not transcend the world, you see it, unadorned, and in that vision, it begins to lose its power over you. The faces around you continue to smile, to strive, to assert meaning, but you now see the mask they wear, because you once wore it too. You recognize the performance, the rehearsed affirmations, the hollow victories. And though you do not condemn them, for they are as bound as you were, you no longer envy them. Their joy is fragile, contingent, temporary. Your sorrow is real, grounded, and quietly freeing. To live without illusion is not to reject life, but to cease expecting it to be otherwise. You eat not for ecstasy, but to sustain. You speak not to be admired, but to connect for a moment in the silence. You exist not to prove worth, but because you do. And in that stripped-down awareness, a strange form of peace arises. Not joy, not fulfillment, those are illusions still, but a steadiness, like the sea under a moonless sky. Each breath is now an acceptance, not a hope. You do not reach, you remain. You do not demand, you observe. The will still stirs, but you recognize its voice, and you do not obey. This, perhaps, is the real strength, saying, enough. Not in despair, but in quiet lucidity. And in that refusal, the self no longer clings to the world, but watches it pass like leaves in a slow river. Still here, still alive, but no longer enslaved. And in this stillness, where desire has no audience, you begin to understand. Suffering did not come to destroy you, it came to remove what was never real. What the world calls joy is often only a brief interruption in suffering, a silence between the throbs of the will. People chase these moments with feverish energy, mistaking the lull for salvation. the brief relief for arrival. But arrival never comes. Every ascent unveils another peak. Every victory casts a longer shadow. The will tricks its host by offering hope, but feeds only on striving. And so man labors under illusions that he himself constructs, running endlessly within a cage whose bars are his own needs. Even love, the most adorned of human pursuits, bears the fingerprints of the will's cunning. It promises unity, belonging, transcendence, but beneath its perfume lies the brute instinct to propagate, to possess, to merge with another as a self against solitude. And yet, in that merging, a new suffering is born. Fear of loss, jealousy, dependence, and the subtle agony of seeing one's reflection in another and mistaking it for meaning. The deeper the attachment, the more the will tightens its grip, disguising slavery as intimacy. The modern world has refined illusion into an industry. Screens glow with artificial light, selling happiness in fragments, a curated image, a measured affirmation, a new thing to want. Consumption becomes a substitute for contemplation. The noise is relentless, precisely because silence would reveal the horror that beneath all the motion the soul remains famished. So it distracts itself with novelty, convinced that the next experience, the next possession, the next self-improvement might finally erase the ache. But the ache is not a flaw, it is the echo of truth. Truth, once glimpsed, cannot be unseen. It unravels comfort with surgical precision. It whispers that the stories you live by are borrowed, the goals you chase are inherited. The self you cling to is assembled from fragments you never chose. You begin to feel the weight of your own becoming not as liberation, but as burden. The idea that you must build yourself, perfect yourself, express yourself. These are the demands of a culture that fears stillness more than death. And yet, stillness is where the real begins. To sit in silence is to meet oneself without disguise. The roles fall away: worker, lover, thinker, dreamer. What remains is the bare being, undefined, unaccomplished, alone. It is not a revelation of grandeur, but of nakedness. You see the child who was taught to perform, the adolescent who learned to yearn, the adult who forgot how to stop. In silence, there is no applause, no recognition, only the quiet truth that you exist, and that existence demands nothing but to be endured. Detachment is not a rejection of life, but of illusion. It does not sever emotion, it allows it to arise and pass without clinging. You feel the pain, but do not claim it as mine. You feel the longing, but no longer mistake it for destiny. You feel the love, but do not build an altar around it. In this space of watching, you are no longer the actor, but the witness. And the witness does not suffer as the actor suffers, for he sees that even suffering is a passing wave upon the ocean of being. There is no salvation in the world, only rest from illusion. No utopia awaits, no final liberation. But there is the peace of understanding, the calm of disillusionment. Not the disillusionment that breeds cynicism, but the one that clarifies. You no longer need the world to redeem you, for you see it cannot. You no longer need your life to be special, for you understand that it cannot. You no longer need the self to triumph, for you see that it was never real. This is not despair, it is release. And so, you walk through the world like a ghost among the living, not because you are dead, but because you have ceased to believe. The games go on, the noise continues, the striving never ends. But you are no longer caught in it. You observe with quiet eyes, speak with measured voice, love without clinging, and suffer without resistance. You do not preach this freedom, for it cannot be taught, only discovered in the collapse of illusion. The wind still blows. The seasons still turn. People still laugh, cry, betray, seek. But your breath is deeper now, not because the world has changed, but because you have ceased demanding it to be otherwise. The world no longer owes you meaning, and that, strangely, is what sets you free. There comes a moment when one stops asking why, not from apathy, but from the recognition that the question itself is the trap. Why? Is the voice of the will refusing what is, dressing reality in the language of entitlement. Why this pain? Why this emptiness? Why this unfulfilled life? But the world does not answer. It never has. It never needed to. Its silence is the answer. There is no, because no plan, no secret waiting to be unlocked. There is only what unfolds, indifferent and vast, while we assign it names in desperation. To live without why is not to abandon thought, it is to abandon the illusion that thought will deliver peace. The intellect, for all its power, cannot silence the will. It cannot reason suffering out of existence, nor conjure permanence from the ephemeral. It builds theories, systems, ideals, but always from the trembling ground of wanting. The philosopher suffers too, though his suffering wears the robe of ideas. And beneath those robes, the same trembling heart. In this space beyond why, one begins to feel differently. The world no longer demands interpretation, only presence. A tree is no longer a symbol, a storm no longer a metaphor, a face no longer a mirror. Things simply are. And in their being, there is a quiet beauty that was hidden beneath the urge to define. You see now that your pain did not need a narrative. It needed a witness, and in witnessing it, the pain does not vanish, but it loses its claws. Modernity cannot comprehend this. It offers therapies, methods, solutions, always with the promise of becoming something better. But to become implies that you are not already what you are. The future becomes a cage lined with velvet, and we decorate it with goals. We are told to manifest, to improve, to optimize, while the soul quietly begs for stillness, for the end of striving. In our pursuit of wellness, we deepen our illness. The inability to rest in what is broken, what is unchanging, what simply aches. True detachment is not cold, it is warm with the light of understanding. You see suffering in another's eyes, and no longer recoil. You do not rush to fix them, nor to fix yourself. You sit in the shared sorrow of being, and in that sitting, a sacred silence forms. Not the silence of absence, but of depth. Words become unnecessary, even invasive. For what can be said that does not cheapen the truth? The deepest truths are carried not in speech, but in stillness, shared between those who have stopped pretending. Every pleasure you once chased now appears faint, like a candle held up to a thunderstorm. You recall the anticipation more than the experience, the build-up, the craving, the brief crescendo before the inevitable fading. And with each fading came the return of hunger. The will never says enough on its own. It must be told. It must be denied, not as punishment, but as liberation. This denial is not repression. It is refusal to participate in a game that cannot be won. The self begins to loosen. The identity you built so carefully, brick by brick, with effort and pride, begins to crumble under the weight of futility. And yet, strangely, you do not mourn it. You feel a lightness in its dissolution, as though your true form was always smaller than the mask. You see that to be no one in particular is to finally breathe. To shed the burden of being someone is to return to the root of being itself. There is no final awakening, no curtain to be pulled back with fanfare. The truth comes slowly and always through pain. Not the pain of punishment, but of release, like a muscle long clenched, beginning to relax. The sorrow does not end, but it becomes a companion, not an enemy. You walk with it, speak to it, offer it tea, and it tells you things the world was too loud for you to hear. The soul does not want happiness. It wants rest. It wants silence. It wants to stop being pulled by the neck through corridors of illusion. It wants to lie down in the dirt of existence and be unremarkable. And in that, it is healed not by rising above, but by sinking into the earth of what island. You begin to bless the pain, not for its pleasure, but for its honesty. It was the only thing that never lied to you. There is a rhythm to existence, but it is not the rhythm of progress. It is the slow, circular breathing of a world that repeats itself in sorrow. The sun rises not to illuminate new triumphs, but to reveal the same wounds under different disguises. We call this movement growth, yet the branches extend only to fall again. What blossoms must wither, and what thrives must rot. This is not pessimism, it is the geometry of being, the pattern etched into the marrow of things. To see this clearly is to stop waiting for change, for justice, for redemption. These are shadows that flicker on the wall of the will's cave, keeping the mind distracted from the stillness that terrifies it. The will does not want truth, it wants delay. It wants stories of transformation, of return, of eventual joy. But the one who sees through these stories stands in a different place. Not ahead, not behind, but beside time, watching, not moved. And what is revealed there, beside time, is something the noise had always hidden. The aching stillness at the heart of all things. Not empty, not full, simply there. The quiet presence that does not demand, does not promise. This presence is not a God, not a principle. It is not kind, nor cruel. It does not hear your prayers, nor punish your sins. It is the still fire that burns beneath all becoming. To look at it without flinching is to dissolve the last illusion that life is for you. This truth does not comfort. It clarifies. It strips away the fantasy of personal fate. You are not the hero. You are not the chosen. You are not even the author. You are a ripple in the flood of the will, a brief form, trembling with need, destined to vanish without trace. And yet, in this vanishing, there is an unexpected peace. The burden of mattering disappears. You no longer have to succeed. You no longer have to impress the dead. You no longer have to heal the wound that is existence itself. Pain continues, but it no longer betrays you. It becomes familiar, like the sound of rain against a locked door. It announces the limits of your control, and in that announcement, it frees you. You see others still fighting, still hoping, still climbing the ladders built by those who died miserable. You do not mock them. You remember being them, and you know they must continue until they, too, tire of the climb. Then, perhaps, they will sit down beside you in the rain and listen to the silence that has no name. Even memory becomes lighter. The past no longer binds you with nostalgia or regret. It is no longer a chain, but a mist. You see your former self so earnest, so desperate, so full of hope, and you offer them no scorn, only a gentle nod. They did what the will demanded. They obeyed, as you did, until you could not. Until the repetition itself became unbearable. And from that unbearable weight, the first breath of freedom arose, not with glory, but with a sigh. You realize now that the world was never broken, it was always indifferent. It was your expectation that shattered. You wanted beauty to be permanent, love to be pure, time to be merciful. But none of these things were ever promised. The world only offered itself raw, fleeting, and silent. And now, stripped of demand, you can finally see it. The crooked tree, the withered hands, the quiet kindness of someone who expects nothing. These are not proofs of goodness. They are simply what remains when illusion has burned away. Detachment, then, is not apathy. It is not numbness. It is the capacity to feel without possession, to weep without drowning, to love without cage. It is the soul's final rebellion, refusing to participate in the will's theater and choosing instead to watch from the wings. The actor lays down the mask, and the person beneath it breathes for the first time without performance. You walk slower now, not because you are weak, but because haste no longer seduces. You listen longer, not because you expect answers, but because you know there is nothing more to say. The birds still sing, the wind still moves the grass, and you are no longer in conflict with any of it. The world does not need your belief. It continues, regardless. And your freedom begins where belief ends. There is no crescendo, no final revelation, only the slow extinguishing of need, like the last coals of a long fire. You do not smile, you do not cry. You remain, not as someone, not as something, but as the silent awareness that no longer asks to be. That, perhaps, is what was always meant by peace. And now the silence deepens. The voice within, once frantic with questioning, now speaks in whispers, so soft they resemble breath. There is no longer a need to explain, to assert, to be seen. The self that once strained to matter now rests like ash after flame. You do not mourn it. Its absence feels like air after suffocation. Light enters, not through windows of victory, but through the cracks left by surrender. There is a strange mercy in knowing that nothing was ever yours. Not your thoughts, not your feelings, not even your name. You wore them for a time, like garments passed down from those who suffered before you. They fit awkwardly, they tore in places, and now, folded and set aside, they are no longer needed. The soul stands bare, not ashamed, not proud, only present. The world continues its indifferent ballet. Cities breathe, children cry, oceans churn, but none of it demands your participation. You are no longer seduced by the pageant of meaning, nor do you stand outside it with disdain. You simply let it pass through you, like wind through hollow bone. No resistance, no claim. What comes, comes. What goes, goes. You remain as witness, not judge. Others will call it loneliness. They will say you have abandoned life, but you know better. Loneliness is the hunger of the self for validation. What you feel is not lack, it is space. The vast, echoing space that opens when the will no longer dictates the contours of your day. This space is not to be filled, it is to be honored. In it, you hear the distant hum of being not yours, not anyone's, just being infinite and quiet. You once feared dissolution. The thought of becoming nothing chilled you, but now, in the absence of striving, you see that nothingness is not a void, it is the ground of all that is real. It is not death, but the end of illusion. It is the dark room in which the candle can finally be seen for what it is, not a source of light, but a fragile flicker, burning only as long as there is air to burn. You no longer need a future. The future was a corridor built by fear, lit by false fires of anticipation. You walked it endlessly, hoping for arrival. Now there is no corridor, there is no movement. There is only this breath, this heartbeat, this moment of existence, not aimed at anything. Purpose has dissolved, and in its absence, the weight of being is no longer unbearable. It's simply island, and so you sit, not because you are tired, but because you understand that there is nowhere to go. The journey was the illusion. The destination was always here. You do not need to be transformed. You do not need to be remembered. You do not need to matter. You are. And that is the end of all becoming. A bird cries somewhere in the distance. A door creaks open. The wind moves through the trees with the voice of no one. The world does not notice your awakening. It does not reward it. It simply continues, as it always has, untouched by epiphany. And you, for the first time, are at peace with that. No defiance, no applause, only stillness. The candle burns lower now. There is no need to preserve it. Let it go out. Let it vanish into the darkness that holds all things. For in that darkness, you were always whole. And that, without fanfare or ending, is enough.